Hello, good day. Welcome to this recording of how to program a basic calculator, very simple kind of calculator that takes a name and responds with a section ID that's based on a few fundamental rules that we're going to program into this calculator. This is a calculator that works for the game Phantasy Star Online, Episode 1 and 2. This is my favorite game, and as part of its 20th anniversary series, I'm programming little quality of life programs, basics in terminal, in using Nano with Python. So we interpret all the programs with Python. We can run them from our terminal. So follow along and enjoy this short tutorial where I will be describing just the basics of the program and all the other stuff that accompanies it, like a proper GitHub setup and pushing to the remote environment. We won't be doing. We'll just be programming the file today. So let me push us over to the main screen where we'll be looking at most of the work we're doing. And I'm going to bring up a Notion file which has a set of features that I coded in just the other day. So we'll be using quick find to find our Phantasy Star Online section ID calculator, and here's our feature list. So in order to get this up and running, I needed to find out how the game decides what section ID you're going to receive when you put your name in. And the way I did that is to Google it, and I found this really great Game FAQs article explaining everything in good detail. And in fact, this person's gone as far as how to transfer ASCII codes and so on and so forth, and given us a list of them, and also program the calculator in a number of different languages. So definitely someone we can learn from. So following this guide loosely, we can see that there are 10 possible section IDs in Phantasy Star Online. Those are Viridia, Greenhill, Skylight, Bluefall, Purplen, and Pinkle, Redria, Oran, and Yellowbows, and Whitehill. And the value next to them is actually the value that the game receives and then knows ties to one of these IDs. And we're going to find out how these values are linked in a second, and that's going to be integral to our calculator. So excuse me, just so there are 95 available characters for use in your name in the game. So when you're creating a character name, you're going to be using one of 95 available characters. Your name may be up to 12 characters in length, so that's important to note. And you will be entering your character name, and all of the ASCII characters values of that name are added up. So I've skipped a bit here. So your name may be up to 12 characters in length, and in Dreamcast, like almost every modern computer, and on from then, the GameCube as well, which I'm using, uses the ASCII character set to represent characters in memory. So when a character is stored in a computer's memory, the computer stores a number that represents that character. So we're going to probably be using ASCII code transformations already, so we can note that. So when you enter your character name in the game, all of the ASCII character values of that name are added up. Then Phantasy Star Online takes only the ones digit of that value and uses it to assign your section ID. Cool. So here's an example. So this is great information. This is exactly what we were looking for. So we know now, using this guide, we know how to actually program our calculator. Well, we know how the calculator works behind the scenes. This is crucial to our programming. So if you enter Steve as the character name, to find your section ID, you first simply add all the values of the letters. So each of these lowercase letters will have a, the S is an uppercase, but each of these letters will have an ASCII value associated with them, which we'll have to find somehow. We'll add them up, and then we take the ones digit of the total sum. And what's more is that you can also just use the ones digits in each of the ASCII values. So here the total is 19 and the ones digit is 9. Here the total is 519. The ones digit is still 9. Great. So we yield 9, and 9 is the section ID for Whitehill. It's associated with Whitehill, the section ID here. So another thing that we'll have to have in our calculator is this index, this reference. So in Python we might use a dictionary to create and set up a kind of key value pairing for each of these section IDs. So that when we obtain a value, we can just reference that value in our dictionary, which contains all the section IDs and values, and return the section ID that we need to give out. So let's go into a bit more detail about how we're going to... Oh, and there's just a tiny little footnote here that says many section ID calculators on the internet make errors when non-alphanumeric characters are included, and this is because they generally don't know how the characters are being converted to numerical values. But Steve here has created this guide and knows deeply how this is happening, and must have some kind of professional information on the subject. And so we're going to follow his guide, and we're going to set up a character section ID calculator for Phantasy Star. So let's start that now. So here's the feature list. We're going to program a simple calculator program. It's going to ask for an input name. It's going to calculate the section ID based on the name input, and then it's going to return a section ID. Fantastic. So we'll leave that feature list here, and we'll return to it when we need it. We'll open up Windows Terminal now. We're going to make our project directory. I've made it in projects, where I keep all my directories for projects, and here it is called section ID calculator. And I've made some files, including a git init repository, which you can do. There's actually a detailed guide in my previous my mini project for the Phantasy Star Online series. The link will be in the description of this YouTube video. You can follow along that guide for the first 20 to 30 minutes to find out how you can get a GitHub repository open whilst you're working from this local environment, and how you can continue to push your work up to the GitHub as you progress through your project. So we've made a README, a git init, and we've got this program called section ID. And with the program section ID, I'm not going to open it because that would be telling how it works, see? But essentially, what we're trying to get is a program which asks for your name and then returns the section ID that you would receive in the game. So let's start a new program, and we'll use Nano. I like using Nano. You can use any other code editor you like, Visual Studio, Atom, whatever you like. But I like using Nano since it's simple for these small projects. Works just fine. I'm going to increase the resolution of the display here, so it's going to change the font a bit so you can see a bit better what we are doing. And there we go. Alright, good. Here's our feature list on the right and on the left here. So we're going to Nano calc program, calc.py. Okay, so calc.py is going to be our Python program, and therefore we're going to add a shebang that tells the environment to use the Python interpreter when we're doing that. This line here is at the very top of the file. It's going to tell the kernel that reads this file, look, use the environment program, which is located user bin and env, to load the Python interpreter to read the following script. And we're going to add a comment that the Python cannot read. So actually what's happening here is this is behind a comment which is ignored, but then the exclamation mark right after this and it being at the top of the file triggers the kernel into reading this one line at the top, and it's called a shebang or hashbang, and it's important for telling the computer which kind of program you want to use to read the script. So this is just going to be a comment, and it's going to tell people what this is. Great. So first things first, we're going to want to make a input function, or an input. We need to be given a chance to input our name. So we're going to save the variable name as an input, as a user given input. So we're going to call input here, which should be already instantiated. It's already included in our Python package, and that should save our file which should save our character name as whatever we give it. So if I give it Alec, then the program now knows that Alec is the name you've given. So why don't we modify that by giving a string that says, please provide a character name. Can we do that? Let's find out. So here what I'm doing, excuse me, getting some dust down my throat. We've got a dot, which means that this directory, and we're calling the calc.py file in this directory, and the computer knows that it's Python because we've added that shebang line at the top, and it needs to be run with Python, and so it's using Python from our environment path, environment variable, to run this file. It knows that because of the shebang line. So we're using /calc.py here to say within this folder run this file. Okay, and now the file is asking, the program that we've created is asking, please provide a character name, and I'm going to write Alec. I don't like the way this looks, so I'm just going to quickly wrap up there with a colon and a space, and that should look a bit better. So we have a name, but do we really know that the name is saved and if that name can be called on? So let's print name right after the input, and that should tell us whether or not we're on the right track. So we're going to run that file. I'm going to provide my name, and it's printing my name. Excellent. So let's go back into the file and see what else we can do. So we have a asks for input name feature, so we can tick off that, and we know that it prints the name and stores the name and prints the name properly. So the next thing is to start calculating the section ID based on the name input. Well, there's a number of things that we need to remember here, and I'm going to add in a banner comment section so that we can remember them properly, and we're going to add them in as notes. So characters, whether or not these are going to be useful or not is another story. Character names can only be 12 characters in length. That's including spaces, and there are 95 characters available on the system. Characters need to be represented by their ASCII code. ASCII code must be summed, and then single digit ones digit must reference a dictionary of section ID values. Simply, that is our kind of meta program or program for the day for this program. So this is what we're going to be running by step by step, hopefully. And maybe it would be easier to work on some things than others. But at the end of the day, we have to learn these as we go, or learn parts of these if we don't know them. Now, I've done this before, yesterday live, and I learnt it all live in a stream. You can watch that stream. I can also provide the link below. But the character names only be 12 characters in length is actually news to me. I didn't catch that yesterday. So we might have to code something in there, or we could allow the we'll have to code something in there to make sure that you aren't using this calculator with any more than 12 characters, including spaces. Okay. Alright, the 95 characters available in the system I don't see as being much of a bottleneck here, since there's a lot of characters to use, and perhaps just a simple help message will keep things in check for any users of the program. Or I could run it in a README as a line saying, don't use any fancy characters or any such thing. But yeah, I could potentially hard code the 95 characters in somehow, but I don't see a need at the moment since we're just making a simple calculator program. So here the characters need to be represented by ASCII code. Okay. So let's start on that one, because I feel like this one is the one that we need to really get down to make any progress. And then afterwards we can fix in some limitations. So we've provided a character name. The name has been stored as the name variable. How are we going to get that name transformed into its ASCII codes? There's actually a very simple function or method that is inbuilt into Python, and it's called ORD, O-R-D. And ORD turns a character, alphanumeric or not, into its ASCII code. So can we just run that on name? Let's find out. So no, ORD expected a character, but a string of length 4 was found. So in that sense, we definitely need to provide it character by character what's going on. So how about a list comprehension? List comprehension is a for loop within a list. It's like a one-liner version of a for loop. And I'll show you what we can do here. So ASCII codes equals list ORD I. So this is the character that we're going to find in our name. We're going to need to pass it in a list here for I in list name. Alright, and we're going to print our test ASCII codes. So I'm going to test print that just to make sure. Great. So we've got our ASCII codes working. they've been given back in a list, which is perfect, and we can continue working on from here. The very next thing that we need to do is we need to sum the ASCII codes. But it might be, let's sum the ASCII codes, so we can take out that test print function, and we're going to return result equals 0, and then for for code in ASCII codes, result plus equals code. Now our result becomes the sum, and we're going to print, print sum codes. We're going to use sum codes instead of results. And see how this goes. Great. So we've got a sum of the ASCII codes that represent my name, Alec. And that sum is 381. What we really want is the ones digit. So this end number of this integer. How are we going to get the end number of an integer is we're going to turn the integer into something we can manage a bit more, and then just take the end of it. To do that, we're going to use the string function, remove the test print here, and we're going to print the string function. Print is just another test statement here, so we can test what our code now is doing. So we're going to take the string of our sum of codes and return or print the last character of the string. Great. We have obtained the number 1, which is the last digit in this sum of codes. So if we also added 5, 8, 1 and 7 and took the last digit of that, it should also equal 1. 5, 8, 13, 1, 14, 7, 21. The last digit of 21 is 1. So either way you do it, it comes out to the same. Great. So we're going to calculate the section ID based on name input. That's done. We've got to tick that off, and we're going to open up our file again. We can check off these boxes as we go, and our ones digit must now reference a dictionary of section ID values. Okay, so here we're going to have to create a ID dict, which equals a Python dictionary, and we're going to open it up by starting with, do we want the section IDs as the keys, or do we want the numbers as the keys? And we're also going to need the cheat sheet here. Here we are. Well, I'd say that if we wanted to reference with the number, then we're going to obtain the value the number corresponds to in the dictionary. So we'll use the numbers as the keys, and ID section names can be the values, so we return a value. So we're going to use the 0. We're going to use this dict to reference all these objects. Provide each one with, so I'm going to try my touch typing skills here so they can come in a bit handy. We can just get this done a bit quicker. So we're starting at 0, of course. 1 and 2, then 3. Blue full. And then we have 4. Purple onion. And 5. Pinkle. 6. Red trio. 7. Orange. 8. Yellow rose. 9. White. Okay. Wonderful. And we're going to need to clean things up a little bit there. So one good thing about Nano is when you have an extra space, it lets you know. It leaves that green block there, so that's good. So we're going to take out those extra spaces, we just don't need them, and that sort of sums up our dict. And now we have a dictionary we can reference. So instead of printing out this last digit, what we really want to do is return the section ID that the last digit references. So we're going to ask program, we'll tell our program to print the value of the dictionary that the last digit of the sum of codes references. It's going to call ID dict here, and we're going to reference it with a variable called reference, and we're going to save that variable reference as the string of the sum code's last digit. Excellent. Print from capital P, forgive me. Print from our ID dict the reference number that we've obtained up here with the reference, and that will print the value of the reference in the dictionary. So it will print one of these section IDs. So let's save that and find out what section ID, my name. Okay, we've got a ID dict which is not referenced yet, and that is because we are referencing ID dict here before the ID dict has been created down here. Works in some environments like Jupyter Labs, Jupyter Notebook, but not here. And we're going to just cut and paste that code underneath the ID dict so that the ID dict has already been created, and then it can be referenced properly afterwards with our print function. Now we run again for the final time, hopefully, and we've gotten a key error. Okay, so the key error here is saying that this string 1 cannot be used to reference any of the ID dicts because it's not found any keys of string 1. So what's going on there, I wonder? Well, all of these ID dict keys are actually integers. So we could have made them strings, and maybe that would have saved a little bit of time, but what we're actually going to do is just make it an integer. Okay, that's a little error again, same thing. We'll make the reference itself an integer. and then we can just print the ID dict with the reference as it was before. That makes more sense. There we go. So if I were to use my name, Alec, as a character name, I would be provided with Greeno. But the problem still stands that if we provide a character name with more than 12 characters, it's going to allow us to calculate that, but in the game we wouldn't be able to provide such a name. So we might want to find a way to limit the characters so that people can only provide character names of 12 characters or less. So that's something we could do, but at the moment we've created our simple calculator program. It's asked for an input name, it's calculated section ID and based on the name input, and it's returned the section ID. So I'm going to take a little time quickly just to see if I can figure out just how we can limit the name input to 12. Potentially that is something a quick Google could show us. Limit input Python. And here's our solution in Stack Overflow. We have just to add a conditional where if the length of the input string is more than 12, just print an error instead and then exit. So we're going to try adding that. I'm going to code it in, of course, by hand, and it should work out. So if len of name is more than 12, print error, only 12 characters left. Sys dot exit. So now, should we provide a lengthy character name, okay, so sys is not defined. I wonder if pi.exit works. Nope. Okay. Of course, we can use try and accept and the asserts. We can use this line of code to make sure that the regular expression only matches if the input is entirely lowercase, ASCII, and 1 to 15. Here a regular expression is imported and we ask it to match but the sys.exit is still perplexing me. Perhaps we just have to import sys at the top. Alright. Oh, and add in sys.exit here. Alright, so let's give this a whirl. Fantastic. So we now have a program that exits if you provide more than 12 characters, and the same program allows you to obtain a section ID providing a character whose length is 12 or less. Thank you for watching. I'm going to provide one more character name, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And have a nice day.